of the APJ Partner Summit virtual. Hopefully this would be the first, will be the last one. It's the first, and hopefully it'll be the last. The next time we'll be in some place nice, sunny, Bali or Phuket. That was a dream that we had earlier on, but that couldn't materialize, unfortunately. Let's hope for the best. So anyway, for those who missed day one, my name's Vincent O. I'm the APJ Channels Director, and I'll be the host for today. And I think there'll be, from yesterday, it was a great, got good feedback from a lot. It was good content, it was good webinar. Today we'll follow up again, and it will be equally or even more interesting and compelling, because we are going to cover some very interesting stuff that we're going to have ahead of us. Right? Before we start off, right, some housekeeping, the customary housekeeping, right? Just remember everyone is muted, and do type your questions in the Q&A section below, or you may put it onto the chat, right? So put it onto the chat, and as we go along, we'll keep it. And so when we come to the Q&A, we can answer, your questions that you've actually put up there. Or else, right, at the end, okay, please, at the end of the session, when it comes to Q&A, if you would like to speak and ask a question, just type on the raise your hand. So at the bottom of the screen there, you can see raise your hand. Please do just click it once, don't click it twice, because the moment you click it twice, it disappears and we cannot unmute you. So just click it once and we see it, and we will unmute you, and then you can actually then speak and ask the questions. Okay, so that's the important thing. You raise your hands in between, we would not be actually interrupting the flow of the presentation. So please do this at the end when we come to the Q&A part of the presentations. The usual customary disclaimers. Remember that whatever is being presented here is confidential. It's meant to be shared with all our partners here only. Please do not share this outside of your organization or any other third party without prior consent. A lot of things here may be forward-looking, so things may change as they go along. This will be reiterated along the way. So day one is gone. Now it's day two. So this is the agenda, just the putting up agenda. It'll be kicked off with Wahab Yusof, our APJ Vice President. Many of you know him. And then the interesting portion of it, which a lot of you all will be highly waiting for, it would be the product vision that's being covered by Steve Hunter, our Senior SE Director for APJ. And then a very, very hot topic today, and the top of mind of quite a lot of organizations, the traditional operational organizations, that today they have to actually look at security in their operational technology environment. That's being covered by Dave Reeves and Hector. And then we're followed by Q&A, and like yesterday, fun and games. What would be good if we do not have some fun and games, right? It's not all work. There's some play here. And last one, I think, you'll be waiting with a bated breath, would be the awards, right? So you want to find out if you've been the top partner in several of the categories in here. So please do stay with us and enjoy the entire day today. So just to kick it off, I'd like to introduce Wahab Yusof. Right, so Wahab Yusof, he's a real veteran in the IT industry, more than 30 years, in the IT industry. He's done several MNCs in the past, from Palo Alto Networks, McAfee, EMC, and Silicon Graphics, all of those things. And what's more important, he sits on the board of many companies, and he hears what are the key things, that's being conversed, what's being discussed at the board level. So he creates a lot of insight to what's happening, what is the top of mind, what are the major concerns that a lot of these board of directors, senior level VPs, chief executives are talking about concerning security and the threats against the organization and to the business. So I'll pass it on to Wahab to kick it off today. Wahab?
Thanks, Vince. That's very flattering, but I don't sit on many boards. I sit on a few boards, government boards, although there are many C-levels who actually join me there. So I'll hopefully give you some a glint of what we talk about. So good morning, good day, selamat pagi, selamat po, namaste, sawadee-kap, konnichiwa, tachahao. That's as much as I can go in terms of language. So welcome and thank you for attending this session. I think Vince and I were talking about it for a long time now. Of course, like Vincent said, the idea is actually to go somewhere nice, secluded, where we can enjoy ourselves. And I don't think it's a dream. I do believe seriously that we will get over this hump of the COVID-19. So we'll hope to make a big bang of a partner summit next year, right? So think about locations and think about things and give us some feedback on that one. You'll notice that Vincent was saying we'll kick off the session with Wahab and then talk about something interesting with Steve Hunter. So not to say that mine is not interesting, but again, in all seriousness, my job is to kind of set the stage for Steve and Dave and Hector and so on and so forth. Because I think that's more important content for you guys to see how we're going to proceed, right? So hopefully in the next few slides, share with you some of my thoughts and where we're heading for the APJ business given the current climate that we have. Cool? Next slide. Okay, so firstly, I want to highlight striking about the partnership, right? So you guys have heard JC speak yesterday, Neville speak yesterday, and this is just not a snazzy slide, right? It is really, really important for us to strike up a smart partnership. And I know this smart partnership term is sometimes a cliche, but you really got to think about how we work together, because the last thing that we want to do is to just guys engage on a casual relationship, casual partnership, and hope for the best, right? The spray and pray method. So hopefully from this couple of days, you glean the more salient points, the important aspects of our business, and then you pick your poison, right? Choose where you want to play, right? Choose the industry that you think that you are good at, right? And just focus on it, right? And then try to get from us, from Steve, from Vincent, from Dave, Mel, any one of the team members here, and your country managers and your sales team on the ground, the best that you can get out of them, right? So alignment is very, very important, right? So one of the asks that we have today is alignment. So striking this partnership, I really want to kind of give you food for thought. Think about how you want to work with us, right? You would have noticed that over the past several months, Vincent and his team has gone on this drive to do what we call a business account plan, right? So it's fine to sign a partner like yourself up. We're happy to have all of you, but it's very, very important that between the two of us, that we know exactly what the objectives are in this partnership, right? What kind of revenue you're looking for, what kind of profitability you're looking for, other than what I mentioned about industry verticals and customers. Given the COVID situation, are you going to play on your install base? Are you going to run a campaign that basically maximize that dollar on that side versus going for new acquisition, because that's a bit more difficult? Or you may actually have the resources and necessities to actually drive new customer acquisitions, right? So it all depends, right? So this business account plan is very, very key for you to have and for us to be aligned on, right? And we could then track on a quarterly basis, annual or biannual basis, how we're doing with this. It's very, very important. So that's what I mean by the smart partnership, right? Be smart about what you want to do. Tell us what you want to do, and at the end of it all, right? It's a win-win for all of us. I will like to say win-win-win, but win-win particularly for you, because right, you exist solely for to raise your value of your own company. Cool. So think about it a bit more. I won't belabor the point because this is not the forum for such a thing. But what I want as a follow-up from this session is think about how you're partnering with ForeScout. Given the situation with the COVID, I think there needs to be a bit of rethink, as I mentioned. I'm reiterating my point earlier about where is your focus going to be? Install base or new customer acquisition, right? And tell us about what your profitability goals are, right? In terms of margin and so on. So this is very, very critical for us. The plan that you have, that you see from JC, it serves that purpose. Next slide. Cool. So some general updates for you before we go into the main thing proper. I think a lot, what's been a lot on our minds, us as well as yours, is this acquisition, right? So what has happened with the acquisition? What happened in the beginning? We were on and then off again, on again, right? So here's the thing. I think, again, the COVID situation affected the judgment call of the companies that acquired us, Advent and capital partners. And of course, as you know, August 18th of August last week, we completed that acquisition, right? And so it says a lot about the fact that they wanted to press on. They were kind of hindered. There was a hump because of COVID-19. They were reassessing the situation. And I think you've seen the news, right? There's legal stuff and all that. These are all just, in my view, in Indonesian words, wayang kulit, or just kind of shadow play, right? We had to do that, right? People had to do that. We have to give due consideration. But most importantly of all, Greg Clark, who is on the board of the new ForeScout setup and is the main purveyor of this acquisition, has clearly stated the value in this acquisition, right? He believes highly, very strongly about where we're going, about the fact that we have established visibility as a main thrust into cybersecurity. He believes in that. He sees a lot of convergence between IT, OT, and IoT. Neville spoke a bit about it yesterday. Steve and Dave will be talking more about it, right? So pay attention to that stuff, right? So post-acquisition, I'll talk about how we organize. One is that we're all really enthusiastic about Greg Clark's and his team's view on where the product is going and what Steve is going to do after this. It's kind of a precursor to where we're heading in terms of cloud, in terms of what we got on premise, how we're going to expand that. You've heard about the modern NAC. We're not going to relinquish that position. We're going to strengthen that position, right? But of course, you know, cloud play is very, very important. And I think those of you who have worked with me over the past couple of years, this is my third year now, will realize that we have gone from strength to strength in terms of customer acquisition. In Australia, Telstra, DHHS, we've won our first Medigate deal, which is basically the health industry partner working very closely with us. We've won the banks, the major banks in Indonesia, Malaysia. We've got the gaming guys. Despite the fact that the gaming industry particularly have been hit by COVID, they continue to invest. I won't give you details because I'm not allowed to, but I can tell you that the gaming centers in Singapore, Macau, Philippines are still proceeding on with investments, because all of these points to one fact, that they're seeing not necessarily a V-shaped turnaround in terms of economy, but certainly a turnaround and a pent-up demand. So the issue is this, right? If I may say a bit about the COVID thing, we do expect the vaccine to come sometime next year. So the idea is not to have a doom and gloom approach to things, but to prepare for what's coming up. And the product roadmap that you're going to hear moving forward, it kind of dovetails nicely into that, right? So again, what I hope for you to get out of this is kind of position yourself, understand the playbooks, and then take the action from there, right? So two things, right? The Envision Partner Program, a quick recap of yesterday, is to serve you, look at your profitability, how you operate, and make you a success in your country. Because at the end of the day, we all know this, right? If you are not successful, you're not making the margins, you're not getting the deals, your top line not improving, there's no reason for us to partnership. Back to that smart partnership thing. So we need to know and feel how you are moving business in your own relative fields. The GTM playbooks are very important because it's a development of what I just said. Where to focus, what our strength. We do, of course, have weaknesses, which we are addressing. But by and large, I think we've been very, very successful with NAC, with visibility, a bit in control. So where do we go from here, right? So pay close attention to the GTM playbooks. I think Vincent and JC have given you all of the insights and the resources to follow up with that. And then Neville presented about the enterprise, the active defense of enterprise of things, right? I can tell you that at the board level, people are very, very concerned about the deluge of devices coming on board the organization. Why? Because one of the main reasons is because of digitalization. So digitalization, as you know, is the catchphrase today, right? The problem with digitalization is that not many people truly understand how they digitalize, right? All they know is that they have to go digital, they have to cut down the number of people, headcount, labor, etc., and automate as much as possible. Come there, and therein ForeScout steps in, right, to give you that visibility of this deluge of devices coming into the organization. So I've heard CIO mention that, hey, look, we're used to IT stuff. We may be okay with IoT, but we sure as hell are not sure about OT, right? And we don't know how to actually meld or merge the two things, but we have to, because I'll give you an idea of an airport, and we're working with several key airports in the Asia Pacific area, right? You know, airports have their standard IT core system, they have their control tower, they have the lighting system on the runways, they have the PLCs controlling flow of water in areas outside of the airport, close to the airport. All of these stuff are converging together, and the traditional CIO IT has very little idea of what to do. Nonetheless, despite of them being in that position, they have to deal with it, right? So even though these systems, like a lighting system, may be a separate system, they still require visibility, they still require cybersecurity. So it's very, very key. How the board look at all of this? Simply, it's not necessarily cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is just a level down. It is enterprise risk. And therefore, we push this idea of enterprise of things, right? This idea has been, like Neville was mentioning, has been spoken about a lot, right? So now we're kind of crystallizing this idea, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the business risk. How do you look at risk? And if you include new devices in IT, IoT, and OT, what is the risk profile? And how do you mitigate it? And how do you address it? Many companies are not, the bulk of companies are not cybersecurity companies. So what do? Automate, outsource, right? And be intelligent about how they handle this, right? And this is the role that ForeScout plays together with some of the key partnership and alliances that we have, right? So you see the three important takeaways for you. Zero trust segmentation for the very reasons I mentioned to you, right? Trust no one, right? Understand before you trust. And the IT-OT convergence, which is still going on, and which presents itself as an opportunity for you. And the OT-ICS, Industrial Control Systems convergence. So all of these are still in a state of flux. It presents a fantastic opportunity for you. And Dave and Steve will mention a bit about it as we go along. Next slide. So the next few slides, I just wanted to show you, give you the confidence that we're all looking at the macroeconomics. China is still moving forward, despite the fact that China was hit by COVID. As far as ForeScout is concerned, it is actually one of the most stable business over the last 3 to 6 months, right? Despite the fact that they were hit by COVID first. And you can see there in Asia Pacific, the largest economies in the world. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, right? And so on and so forth, right? And all of this is in APJ patch. So again, from a GDP point of view, COVID situation aside, we still see fantastic growth. In Asia, in ASEAN alone, Indonesia will be number 6 economy in the world stage by 2024, according to World Economic Forum. This is not for me, right? So again, we're waiting for the recovery and to show that APJ is a fantastic area. Next slide. And I wanted to highlight this. Why? Because, not because I'm based in Singapore, but the data that we got from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which actually does a lot of research into this, is that a lot of foreign direct investment and VC money is coming through Singapore or to Singapore to be distributed, right? So you all know the situation with the finance now, zero interest rates and so on and so forth. So people are looking, the hedge funds are looking, the VCs are looking to where to place their monies and invest in infrastructure and tech companies in the region. There's a lot of money coming through here. So despite the COVID situation, people are now thinking, right, where do we place our money to get the best returns in a couple of years or 3 years, right? So again, it augurs well for us because, again, we're feeling a little bit down about the COVID situation. When are things turning around, but I can tell you there is a pent-up demand that is coming up, right? So be prepared for it. My advice to you is to be prepared for it, because when it comes, you'll be just a flurry of activities and you'll be very confused as to what your priorities are as far as cybersecurity is concerned. Next slide. Okay. And again, the intent here is to show that the focus on APJ, right? Yes, for now, our contribution is about 12% of the total contribution of ForeScout comes from APJ, which means that the potential is still huge, right? And this is something that Greg Clark, talking about acquisition, Greg Clark, our new board member, has mentioned. He says that it should be a 60-40 split between the US in terms of revenue contribution and international, right? So right now, ForeScout, we are about 70-30-ish. And so we can move to about 60-40 in a very, very short span. That's one of my key objectives for us. And with you to play a very, very key role in it. At the end of the day, the way that we run APJ, for most companies that I know that I've been with, is that it is a very strong partner play. So we have not changed our strategy, by the way. We may have hired people, enterprise salespeople, but we have not changed the way that we work with partners, right? Now, as many of you have worked with us before know, and those of you who come on board will begin to appreciate that this is not a run-of-the-mill, plug-and-play, off-the-shelf solution, because it addresses so much of an enterprise's cybersecurity requirement, right? So what does it mean? It means that it's an opportunity for you to delve deeper into professional services, for example, or you take a bigger, more important role. Something that I must say that we have not been successful in trying to convince you to take on a greater role in deployment, right? Because look, when we first, visibility is the easiest thing to do for ForeScout. When we go into things like control, we go into things like expand, working with people like Splunk, CyberArk, and so on and so forth, right? It presents a service dollars opportunity for you. I want you to really, really consider that. So that's the reason why I mentioned this smart partnership. Look at the lay of the land with ForeScout, because our touch points are just tremendous, right? To use a Donald Trump's words, tremendous, right? So fantastic interfaces to all of these tech partners that we have. So it presents an opportunity for you. And so although the potential is huge for APJ, it means that it boils down to execution, how you want to execute. I must say that for those of the partners, for those of you who have decided to become our focus partners, you have seen incredible growth, right? A fantastic growth, very interesting growth, right? Especially with large customers. So pick up that conversation with Vincent and his team and your country managers to see where you want to play. Okay, cool. So again, the last 3 slides is just to show you that, hey, despite the current situation, we have a growth potential, which is really, really good for you. Next. All right. So how are we organized to tackle this? Now, granted the fact that we've kind of consolidated a bit, there's still these main 5 geos, not necessarily in order, as you know. I've shown you the GDP economic slides. The way that we organize is India as a sub-region, Japan, Greater China, which covers Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, ASEAN, and ANZ. So in all of these geographies, we have our RDs, regional directors, or country managers running the show with salespeople on the ground. Some of them, at least 3 of them, have channel account managers to assist and help you. And as Karini mentioned yesterday, we're looking at investing more in the channels in these 5 areas. Okay, so India is Ram Sundar. I'm sure he's online. Japan, we're looking for a new leader that will work together with Rowan in ANZ. Greater China, we have Kitty Han, people like Ava, Ricky in Hong Kong, Romina in Taiwan, and so on, right? And ASEAN is run by Ban Leong, with presence in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. So we look to expand our presence in all of these areas, but expand smartly. Next slide. So here's how we organize. I mentioned a bit about that, where we are placed. Again, you can see the way that we are set up gives room for greater growth, right? We've begun to break into large accounts, as I told you, in each of these sub-geos. Particularly in Japan, we have companies like SMBC, who's actually going to phase 2 and phase 3, right? They started phase 1 last year. So there's upsell and cross-sell. It's a fantastic opportunity. Again, back to what you want to do, right? So once you've entrenched yourself in a strategic large account, you can rest assured that there'll be greater opportunities to come, right? So similarly, across all of the regions, across all the sub-geos, we have all of the G2K, T6K. So which goes into the next slide, Vince, on the GTM. So did we miss out the GTM slide? Okay, it comes after this. But before I go to the GTM slide, so I wanted to put vision by translating to mission, something more tangible, right? Was hey, look, what's the vision? You know, we won't go in 5 years. So look, because of the current situation, I think we're a bit short-term to mid-term view of what we want to do. So when I say 5 by 20 in 2 years from now or less, right, it's basically in the 5 sub-geos to hit 20 million net revenue to ForeScout, right? Net to ForeScout, which translates to about $30 million for each of the sub-region. That is our goal, right? And that means we'll hit 100 million in about a couple of years, okay? Now, a bit about acquisition. We were acquired at about $29. It was supposed to be 33, I know. But there's a lot, the feeling is that there's a lot, it's not only a feeling, but there's a high degree of confidence, which this is what I can tell you, from the acquirers, from Greg Clark and his team, that we can double in a very, very short time in terms of the value of the company, right? So I'm not a stock expert or anything like that, but I think you should really, really take a look at that and see whether, you know, put some skin in the game in terms of investing in ForeScout. Okay, cool. Next. Right, so a very simplified view on how we run a market. The GTM has not changed. As far as ForeScout is concerned, the people on the ground, we are focused on the high-touch accounts. 80-20 Pareto's rule, right? 80% of our revenue should come from the named accounts. And these named accounts are coming from the G2K, G2000 account, the next 6,000 account, the T6K accounts. And this is being managed and handled and touched by either ForeScout or the focus partner, right? So I must say that at the expense of tier 2 partners, we are driving hard to actually get and recruit focus partners, right? Because it requires a lot of effort in terms of realizing the full value of ForeScout, starting from visibility all the way to control to orchestration, okay? And of course, the 20% coming from the commercial non-name mid-market, that is to be handled by tier 2 partners, those who basically sell other things and feel that they can value add by putting ForeScout in. And this is a pure disty play, right? Where the distribution like Westcon, EC, and what do you call this? Net1 in Japan, Digital China, Arrow in Australia, and so on and so forth. Actually, we are looking at you guys, the distribution, to actually manage this part of the business, right? So work with our sales rep, as I said, back to the smart partnership. Make sure you're aligned, decide on which accounts that you want to play in, where you have strength, and then build a business plan around it, agree with the team, do a teaming agreement, and then press ahead. It's a very simple and direct GTM and coverage, okay? They are we have it down pat in terms of what we want to do in terms of accounts, so please have that conversation as soon as you can after the partner event is done. Next slide. Okay, so some stats. Again, I'm not we can't really show you what the numbers are because that will give away. I gave you some of it already by talking about 5 by 20. But just wanted to show, I joined in 2017. This is coming to my third year, or the third year next month. We have seen consistent growth, right? A bit of a stutter at the end of last year, but still significant growth, right? We were expecting huge growth in 2020 before COVID started. But with the changes in the way that we position ourselves with Eyesight X coming online, with segmentation coming online, with the convergence, OT, I think 2019 was a watershed year for OT, right? We won some really key accounts, which Dave will allude to in his presentation, right? So very encouraging in mining, in energy, and so on. In Japan, we've had a slew of different type of OT customers. So again, that potential is being realized, right? So again, ask yourself, what part do you play in this growth that we're going to see? Right, the net of it all is we are growing significantly, right? 20% is modest. We were actually heading for about 50% growth, but we're gonna pare back a little bit and be a bit more practical, right? And look at focus at key accounts, strategic accounts that plays to our strength. If you can correlate it to the playbook that we spoke about yesterday. All right, next. In terms of net new logos and this is the data was supposed to be shown to you in February this year, right? So we can show you only 2019 data. Net new logos 118, a customer base of 1,164. This is very important because I want you to, as a takeaway, to relook at your current customer setup, the current customer base, and run campaigns together with Vincent's help, the program that we say, the Envision program, and try to extract the best you can from the current install base, right? 6 customers over 150K devices and growing. We've barely scratched the first surface in Australia, in Japan, in China. We're beginning to see 50K and above devices. And in terms of transactions at above 100K in 29, we're 55. Every region had a significant contribution there. Next slide. Okay, and so this is how it looked like in terms of 2018 was really good. 2019 was good for ANZ. India picked up really well. Japan faltered a little bit, but again, I think, as you know, Japan and Australia share some similarities in terms of how mature the market is. I think we've not penetrated Japan in the way that we wanted to, and so it presents itself as an opportunity to really go gangbusters in Japan, right? We know that manufacturing is being hit, but we see, as I said, finance still spending, infrastructure still spending in Japan. So there's still a lot of headroom for us. Similarly with China, we're seeing really positive. Typically, China and Australia starts very slow in the year because of holidays and Chinese New Year. But interestingly enough, what I can say is that both regions have stabilized in fact, and growing very, very rapidly. You know that the US-China issue kind of affects everyone in both countries. But that said, I think they have found niches in which to grow. The non-government business in China, particularly, is growing very rapidly. Right? Cool. And so I'll leave you with this because I wanted Steve and Dave to give more time to Steve and Dave to talk about the nuts and bolts of stuff. And again, to hone in your thinking about what's important for you, for your business, right? Before I go into all these points, right? Take a look at where you stand, of what ecosystem you already have, what other products, whether it's CyberArk, Splunk, McAfee, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, whatever they are, right? Have a clear view of where it is, and then understand clearly how ForeScout can value add and increase sales and revenue top line into that. One. Two is that how does ForeScout make your offering more sticky or stickier, right? Right? We value add tremendously to all of this. So really take a look. This is why I talk about smart. Start thinking about all of these versus, oh, okay, this is a bunch of capabilities of ForeScout, let's go and sell. Again, think carefully about this. That's my advice, right? So align with your ForeScout country original team quickly, immediately. Again, not to boil the ocean. Don't do 10,000 things. Just do a few things well. Do a few accounts that you know that you are in there very well. Understand the ForeScout playbook, correlate it with what you're doing, and choose your focus I mentioned earlier on. And grow your business. This is an opportunity that's being missed. I can tell you that it's a bit of a frustration for us in the sense that we keep on going back to our own internal PS, which is not set up as a professional services audit. What we do is we do high-end, deployment. We do detailed deployment on, let's say, maybe you want to do, integration. Of course, we have architecture design and so forth. But you are missing a great opportunity to do deployment and take it to the customer, the control level, right? So again, you're missing this opportunity. I would strongly encourage you to beef up, right? Especially if you're dealing with strategic accounts, the large accounts. There will be fantastic opportunities in terms of services. They'll go back to you. Rather than you coming back to ForeScout and say, hey, look, this is not working and we need you to look at it. It's an opportunity for you, right? And talk about project management. It's also an opportunity for you to earn dollars doing project management, right? It's something that, these are all the observations that we see, okay? And I go back to what I said about the way that bots see cybersecurity implementation. It's all about managing enterprise risk, okay? And finally, with all of the 3 points above I mentioned, is for you to sell value, to make your offering stickier, right? So again, a lot of things that you already know, what I mentioned. My ask is just really focus on what's important to you and make it count for 2020 and beyond, 2021, right? Make it count, right? Focus on what you're good at, right? And before I go, just a note on OT, right? We're all excited about this convergence, about IT, OT, but understand that it is not a trivial matter, right? It presents a good revenue opportunity, but it also means that you have to put effort into it, right? This OT, IT convergence is not as straightforward as we would like it to be, right? Because the different mindset, different type of people looking at it. One is 24/7 uptime. The other is like, not so much that, but more on risk. So think about it really carefully. And if you want to do OT, last thing I want to be really open and transparent with you is that all of you sign up for OT. I don't think that's going to happen, right? Again, focus, decide what you want. We will help you get there. Cool? So I hope with in the last 15-20 minutes or so, I think, is it 20 minutes or so? I've given you some of my thoughts on where we're moving ahead with APJ. In terms of upside, tremendous. It all boils down to execution. I repeat myself ad nauseum. And so let us help you be successful so that we can be successful as well. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it. Back to Vincent.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks very much, Bob. Thank you very much for that. So I think based on the presentation and what Wahab has been given, some of his insights, particularly at the board level and senior levels of executives in companies, that we are more and more confident and very bullish that what we actually have as ForeScout, the solutions and what the problems that we are actually addressing, it's really there. And the thing is, like I said from yesterday, the big problem is that we had always been boxed into this solution, the use case of just the neck. It is important, but it's how you elevate that conversation. So when we start to bring in things like, the enterprise of things, and now understand why we bring in enterprise and things and not just device visiting and control, is just to broaden that capability that we actually have. It's one of those best kept secret, but we need to get it out. So by rebranding ourselves, we change that conversation. And when you start to bring in zero trust into this, we become much more relevant to the executives, the CISOs, the VP of security, all of these. It's an open door to reach higher levels. And that's why it's very, very important. So to actually go into the next, it's a nice segue into the next. We have Steve Hunter. He's the APJ Senior Systems Director, right, for ForeScout for APJ. And, Steve, has been a long time opponent for the cybersecurity, worked in Cisco many, many years. And I'm seriously, coming in and seeing him how he worked. I feel so confident that and feel very comforted that he's helming the systems engineering team over here. I get feedback from partners from out there in the market, even globally, that the APJ SE team is one of the strongest and really competent systems engineering team available in the company. And it's all kudos to Steve for providing leadership into this. And I was talking about zero trust. It's APJ leading the effort in this particular thing in the company, right, as we went around on the roadshow. So not to take away any thunder from Steve, I'll hand it over to you, Steve. Right.
That's great. Thank you very much, Vince. And thank you, Wahab, there as well. And I will say that APJ for ForeScout is leading the way in some of the discussion areas that we're having internally, specifically around zero trust. But that isn't because of me, and it's not because of my SE team. It's actually because the customers and the partners in APJ started asking us about this first. So we are about 12 months ahead in terms of the maturity of our conversations. And that's largely because of you guys on the call and the customers that we support here in the region. Now, the job that I have here today is actually probably the most fun of the jobs, because talking to the partner community here in Asia is really honestly my favorite of the communities, because number one, you guys understand in most cases our technology really well. And for some of you, you've worked with ForeScout for longer than I have. And I'm coming into my 5th year, or actually just started my 5th year with ForeScout a couple of months ago. And the other thing is you see it from a different perspective than we do here in Vendorland, because you work with multiple vendors and you work with multiple customers. And so I like to test the messages that we have against you and get your feedback. And that's part of what we're going to do today. My job here is an interesting one. In the next 30 to 35 minutes is to take you through the vision of where ForeScout is going, the mission that we are aligning the company resources behind in terms of R&D, core product engineering, field sales, and channel support, and to get your feedback during the course of this around what resonates with you specifically and things that you might change if you had the option to do so. And I'll be asking some questions around that. So with that, let's dive in and make sure that this works. Now, in terms of Q&A, drop your questions, any questions, in the Q&A panel as I go. If the question is salient to the topic that I'm talking about at that point, I'll answer it there. Otherwise, we'll queue it up for the end. Vince mentioned the forward-looking disclaimers, but I have to be very specific about this. This presentation does contain forward-looking statements and forward-looking product developments from ForeScout. I will differentiate or make it clear when the innovation I'm talking about or the development I'm talking about is near future, as in coming in the next major release we'll talk about in a second, or if it's more of a research topic that we're still working through. So I'll differentiate there. Please do not make any purchasing decisions or advise your customers to make any purchasing decisions based on anything you see in this presentation. And if there's something in here that really is a sticking point and that you need to know more about in order to progress a deal, please talk to Vincent, Wahab, or myself before moving forward. So there are 3 broad categories of things we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what does active defense for the enterprise of things mean. It is not a pivot for ForeScout. It is an evolution of what we've been building on for the last 16 years. And we're going to talk about why it's needed very briefly. I'll spend a lot more time on the core innovations that we're working on right now and what's coming in the next major release, which is later this year. And then I'll actually run through the areas that we're looking a bit further at in terms of core R&D and innovation in that space, and I'll ask you some questions around that. Right. Now, for those of you that have seen our corporate pitch, this might look a little bit familiar, but I'm only going to spend 2 slides on this. So when I first started at ForeScout and started working with most of you, IoT was already beginning to be a topic that was on the radar of CISOs and of partners with security practices. And if we go back 5 years and just take 2 examples, the television and the CCTV camera, they were already beginning to develop more capabilities than a single function device, and therefore introduce more risk. So 5 years ago, we saw the introduction of 4K TVs, the devices themselves, the TVs, the panels were getting connected to corporate networks through Wi-Fi or through wired networking. And there was some kind of basic infrastructure in terms of software and applications available on those devices. And in the camera TV, in these corporate CCTV camera, we actually saw them make the shift from cable and analog to digital and IP, and begin to introduce things like slip and fall detection or noise detection or basic motion detection on the camera. So the devices themselves were getting smarter 5 years ago. But if we fast forward to where we are today, the devices are getting ever closer towards what we would have to deal with in terms of risk, like a general purpose compute. We have 8K resolution monitors now available today for sale in your home and in your corporation. Those devices have full stack IP stacks, wired, wireless, Bluetooth, with all of the vulnerabilities that are associated with that. The app stores that are now available for those devices are essentially the Android app store, with hundreds of devices or hundreds of applications being contributed by unknown sources that are going to run on those devices that we have in our homes and that we have in our corporations. They're also leveraging technology like Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, where they're listening to everything we say to process voice control commands, which means that they're relying on connectivity outside of the enterprise back to the internet, or if they're in the home, same scenario, back to the internet. And they're also becoming, in some cases, the central point of control for other devices. So they're becoming a smart hub for IoT devices. And that's just in consumer grade and enterprise grade televisions. If we look at what's available in the video camera space, the evolution of the video camera mimics this very closely, where those cameras are now IP connected, connected to cloud services. They do advanced analytics on the camera. They can subscribe and publish events to MQTT queues that can then be consumed via RESTful APIs. All of the same challenges we have in terms of securing a server now apply to securing a camera. And that's really only been in the last 5 years that we've seen this. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that the enterprise has absolutely become an enterprise of things. And it's not just the small subset of devices that we've talked about from a security perspective from the early 2000s through to 2015. The device landscape has changed dramatically. And we were talking about this a few years ago, but today it's even more pertinent. And we've gone from a large variety of devices, an ever-increasing variety of devices, to, frankly speaking, thousands of different types of devices that are used in the enterprise. And I'll define what the enterprise is in a minute. But that device landscape is one lens for which we have to think about how are we defending the enterprise when we look at the device landscape. That landscape is characterized by a couple of things. Number one, huge device diversity. There are far more types of devices running far more types of operating systems, doing far more advanced functions than we had 5 years ago. And what you'll notice is that where we start with a single purpose function for a particular device. Smart TV gets connected to do digital display. Well, over time, that device itself evolves and more functionality gets added to it. So all of these single purpose devices suddenly become more connected, more capable, and are running different operating systems and increasing the risk that's present in the enterprise. The quantity of those devices is increasingly massive. And often the devices are not owned by the enterprise that's responsible for protecting them. And we see this across many industries. We'll see it in the clinical or the medical industry, where the healthcare technology provider has a managed service, must be connected to the hospital network, but they own the device and the IT component of that device on the network. Same thing in manufacturing, same thing in mining, increasingly so in financial services. So the device landscape has an impact on how we think about defending the enterprise of things. Connectivity has radically changed in the last 6 months, especially in this kind of post-pandemic world with large swathes of people working from home. We'll talk about that separately a little bit later. But even in core enterprise networking, we had seen over the last 5 years a continuing evolution of network connectivity, an introduction of new vendors, of new approaches, even for the regular enterprise. And that has implications around how we actively defend the enterprise of things when the enterprise itself is changing from a networking perspective. And moving forward, we see the presence of things, of technologies like 5G, going to change again how we have to deal with device discovery, device protection, and device defense, as these devices may not be connected to a corporate network at all. And then finally, behavior and usage. So we've seen probably the biggest shift we've seen certainly has been the shift to working from home and working remotely. What that's done in some cases is taken a model that IT had developed over time, and a good example of this would be, say, a financial services company heavily using thin clients, to suddenly that model no longer works. And in the last 6 months, they've shifted to being an entirely mobile workforce with laptops. So that security approach they took with thin clients was turned on its head. And now we have this situation where they've equipped their entire employee base with laptops, and they're in this mode of half the employees are going to be in on one day and half the employees are going to be in on another day. And so we are now enforcing this. I take a device, I put it on the network, which I control quite well. I then take the same device and let the employee take it home to a network that I don't control at all. And then they bring it back. And that becomes the normal mode of operation for that customer. So the device usage has changed radically over time. The other thing we're seeing is cloud adoption is absolutely mainstream for user-facing applications. Office 365, Zoom, Box, Asana. The shift to working from home has accelerated the adoption of SaaS first for many user-facing productivity applications. But yet we still have the legacy applications running in the enterprise, which has meant that we've had to deal with that through connectivity innovations or connectivity deployments like more VPN or different VPN, VPN-less remote connectivity to the corporation. All of that means that we have a different mode of, a different set of lenses for understanding how to protect this thing and this user that is interacting with enterprise data. And the important thing here is that there are different maturity levels for how well protected you are by each, sort of factored by each of these lenses. So a well-managed corporate device, Windows laptop running on the corporate network, has one risk posture, because that risk posture is based on the endpoint itself. Is it running all of the agents and is it well secured? And the environment that it's running in. Is in a corporate network accessing printers that are authorized corporate printers. I take that same device, I move it home, and the risk profile for that device has changed. Yes, it still has the endpoint security agents on it, but now I'm accessing devices that are not necessarily trusted or are not authorized in that home environment. And I'm surrounded by an unknown number of things in that home environment as well. And so that magnifies the challenge that we have in terms of addressing the enterprise of things from a security perspective. So is it a real problem though? And 5 years ago, arguably, no, it wasn't. We hadn't seen much in the wild where bad actors were exploiting non-PC devices for malicious purposes. That has changed over the last 5 years, and we have many examples of that. So what is the mission that ForeScout is evolving to? We are, the mission for ForeScout is to build a capability and a product set that lets customers actively defend their enterprise of things. And the way we're going to do that is by enabling that customer to continuously identify, segment, and enforce compliance of every connected thing that is responsible for getting business done for that customer, regardless of what that thing is or where it is. And the reason it's important to talk about the mission is This will help you understand when we're innovating in particular areas or investing in particular areas, it is all around delivering to this vision. So the traditional approach that ForeScout would have taken, or the traditional approach that that organizations took to network security, really was around, point of time access control, if we're thinking about NAC. And what we're seeing really the need is something we call active defense. And active defense is simply the continuous adaptive protection based on a real-time cloud scale risk analysis based engine, which can be augmented by external data sources. And that lets us make real-time decisions around device access and control continuously and at scale. And so, for example, I think Greg Clark, we've talked about him a few times. He describes it very well. He was the former CEO of Blueco and then the former CEO of Symantec, who were a ForeScout customer. He talks about instant inoculation, so that if we have a community of ForeScout users out in the world, and today we have about 80 million devices under management, it should be possible that when we see a bad actor or a malevolent device in one of these environments, one place, one time, that we're able to then identify that as risky and take an action in another enterprise, or permit that other enterprise to take action based on that intelligence and do something about that device. Auto assign it to a quarantine VLAN, take some kind of remediation access on the device, or even just inspect it with greater fidelity around telemetry. And that gives us the protection of the crowd in that scenario. So what are we actually doing in this space? Like, where are we adding technology or capabilities into our product set that you're going to need to learn about, that we're going to deliver to our clients? For those of you who have been with us for a while, we started 2006 really through to early 2010. Non-802.1x agentless NAC was the success of ForeScout at that time. It gave people an alternative to rigorous 802.1x based NAC. What I guess wasn't clear at the time was that the approach that we took to do agentless non.1x NAC relied on doing 100% device discovery first. And then from there, we could do a network access control action. The real value here is not the network access control action. The real value is in that 100% device discovery first. And we realized that, and then from about 2010 to 2015, when I joined, we were focused really on building out capabilities beyond pure managed NAC environments or managed device NAC environments, and we expanded into campus visibility and control. To do that, we needed to be able to scale, and so we were able to hit about 1 million devices in a deployment. We had to have augment the discovery techniques we had to be able to address non-managed devices, printers, cameras, PCs, network infrastructure, and we had to do that across more types of network, not just campus, wired and wireless, but we had to be able to do that across VPN and then eventually across the data center too. We also had to support the wide variety of networks that customers were using. So heterogeneity was critical at that time. And then the last 5 years, we've been talking about device visibility and control as kind of the mission of the company. And that was the expansion from just looking at the campus to looking at data center, cloud, OT, the other parts of a network in an enterprise, but really with a focus on all of the endpoints that are connected, because there's no inherent risk in the network. There is inherent risk in the devices that connect to that network. And so that's why we are focused on device visibility and control. But in order to be able to do that, we have to be fantastic at integrating with networks. That also means we have to be able to do that at an unprecedented scale. So at this point, we haven't talked about anything new. And what we're talking about sort of today, or where we're at today, the technology you can sell from ForeScout is a robust and strong foundation. And it's made up of these components here on the left. iSight, iInspect, iSegment, iControl, and iExtend. iSight and iControl are what you would have formerly known as Counteract, our core visibility and control platform. iInspect is the rebranding or the renaming of Silent Defense, which is our OT-specific security product. And iSegment is a new enhancement or product offering on top of iSight that really addresses enterprise-wide segmentation, is foundational to the way we address zero trust in the real world. And then finally, we have iExtend, which is the series of modules that we have that can connect to third-party applications. But most important in that, probably the most interesting part of that from my point of view, is iExtend Connect, which is the new framework for integrating with any third-party technology. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But we've had this for a long time. We have already in version 8, we introduced Device Cloud, 12 million unique device fingerprints that have been manually classified using our data scientists to generate thousands and thousands of classification profiles and a variety of active and passive techniques to integrate with networks. But where are we going? And Wahab mentioned this in his section. He talked about something called ForeScout X or iSight X. This is not the name of the product. The product doesn't have a name yet. Internally, we refer to it as iSight X or ForeScout X. And the core of what we're addressing, it really revolves around 3 capabilities. The capability around identification, a capability around segmentation, and a capability around enforcement. And so we want to enhance, or we're doing research in introducing machine learning into the classification side, so the identification side of endpoints. I'll talk about that in detail in a second. Once we've done high fidelity device classification, take that knowledge at scale in the cloud, use that to do real-time multi-factor risk analysis of every device that we have in the device cloud, and then make that risk analysis available back to the users of the ForeScout platform in real time, continuously, and at scale. Then we can use that risk analysis to make decisions around segmentation. As opposed to rigorous rules based on device classification, we can now make risk adaptive decisions around segmentation using iSegment. When once we've made those policies, we can then respond to events that are risk-based in real time using iControl. In order for us to be able to do this, we're going to have to increase the scalability of our product, because we know we have to address use cases beyond the on-campus. So identify, segment, and enforce, leveraging the power of the cloud and our crowdsource device cloud. The way we break that down into the product areas for development is the identification side is really iSight for IT and IoT, and iInspect for OT, and then perhaps some third parties for specialist verticals like Medigate for clinical, for medical environments. Segmentation really focused on the evolution of iSegment. It has been out for a bit under a year now. We're already on release 3, the Amsterdam release that was talked about yesterday, and there's more innovation coming in Q4 this year. And then finally on enforcement, we have evolutions of iControl and the augmentation of controls using iExtend. So let's talk about identification. So 3 main areas of innovation that are going into iSight in the identification area. The first is, I've mentioned it, is introducing machine learning, right? And that's machine learning based in the cloud. The second is what we do with automatic risk scoring of devices that we've detected, discovered, and classified. And then introducing a new approach towards managing ForeScout deployments, leveraging the power of the cloud. Now, this is probably one of the most interesting areas for us. So what are we trying to do, or what will we be doing with the next release of ForeScout, leveraging this ML enhanced device cloud? 70 million endpoint profiles in there, able to be mined at scale using ML techniques rather than manual data science. The ultimate goal here is to be more detailed in what we discover about any particular device, and more accurate in classifying what that device is from the outset. Both of those things are done in order to build a better foundation to understand and quantify device-related risk. That is the reason that we're doing this. We want to be having a view of risk of every device across every part of the enterprise, real-time and continuously, and at scale. In order for us to be able to do that, we're introducing a new deep packet inspection architecture in iSight X. I'll go through that when I talk about the sensors. That gives us a whole set of extra capabilities around classification that we don't have today. It will mean that, and hopefully there'll be some good questions about what does that mean for encrypted traffic and where you put sensors, but we'll get into that as well. But this is a huge amount of work being done in the last 12 months to get this ready for launch in Q4 this year. So this is only a very short distance away. And I'm seeing some good questions come through as well in the chat as well as in the QA. We'll come back to that. Subsequent to that, so let's say we have this device data lake of 70 million devices. What we want to do with that, or what we can do with that, and what we will do with that in iSight X, is we're going to augment that with real risk information, multi-factor risk information. And what I mean by that is that there is risk information or device risk indicators specific to the device. It is a particular brand of HP laptop. It's running a particular version of firmware. It's running a particular sort of operating system and has a set of applications installed. We know that from iSight today. What we can't tell you is what risk does that introduce into the environment related to just that device. Now, at scale in Device Cloud, we absolutely can do that. So we can augment our device data lake with external risk repositories. So it could be CVEs for the device, firmware, OS, app installed. It could be IP reputation databases around we know information about this device and what it's talking to. And so there's a risk relationship with that, or specific device vulnerabilities. It could be things like we know that the device has a certain number of ports open and it has a certain set of open file shares that are indicative of more risk versus less risk. So, there's a variety of different device vulnerability related risk factors that we will put into that. And that's on one side. The other part of it is also that there's externally observable risk around that device. So we have already IOCs, but rather than IOC ingestion on the premise, we'll be able to do that scan across all the devices in the cloud. We can identify network policy violations or behavioral differences around, what one device that has all of the similar components to another device has, except that it's behaving a bit differently in terms of open file shares, network traffic, that kind of thing. Comparing configurations. So if we're doing compliance checking around baseline configurations and validating that we are compliant with a configuration baseline in one environment and compare that against configuration baseline repositories from third-party systems, as another example. And then finally, cloud-based management. And this is interesting because a lot of you put a lot of effort into gaining skills in deploying ForeScout. And ForeScout on-premise is not a simple solution to deploy. It is simpler than the alternatives, but it's still, it requires a set of expertise. What we're going to do with the next release of ForeScout is we're going to augment that with some cloud management capability that sits on top of the deployment that we've already done. And so, we've gone through and done our FSCEs, and we know how to deploy ForeScout on-prem. The policy engine is there, but we want to be able to add the machine learning risk classification, or machine learning device classification, and device data lake related risk classification. That's the SaaS offering that will feed back into the on-prem deployment. And I actually have some other sites that I need to deploy sensors on, but I don't need to do a full stack appliance deployment. I'll be able to do that through the cloud. So what does that look like? So today, this is the environment that you've been deploying for ForeScout today. We have appliances on-prem, is predominantly on-prem. The enterprise manager is on-premise. The classification engine and the policy engine are on-premise. And then maybe we've done a little bit in the cloud in terms of integrating with the cloud, doing classification and assessment and discovery of the cloud endpoints, or you're running an appliance in AWS or Azure and augmenting the on-prem deployment that way. Segmentation is a cloud delivered service today that ties into that with iSegment. In the next release, we are shifting to this model. So we still have the on-prem components that we have today. We then have a much heavier investment or delivery of cloud-related services for risk assessment, device history, longer analytic time, sensor management. But note that the enterprise manager still on-prem. Classification, still on-prem, augmented by what's off-prem. And the policy engine in itself is entirely on-prem. As you can see, here's by the end of 2020. So this is in the next release, the iSight X release, where it's a cloud-augmented version of ForeScout. And it gives us these options for these ultra-lightweight cloud-managed sensors. So a couple of things about the on-prem deployment today. This is what you're doing today. The challenge with this is, so even today, we still have the industry's most reliable device classification engine, albeit that we only update it monthly with the information we get out of Device Cloud. And we store for the management and executive dashboard view, we store rolling data for 30 days, which is an enhancement over the 3 days of device data that we keep for doing real-time decisions around policy and permitting devices on and off. And as I mentioned, we can deploy in the cloud or not. And we're really doing device classification across 3 dimensions. So function, vendor model, and OS. With iSight X, we have far more device profiles that we'll be mining. And so we'll end up with real-time classification for devices based on extracting that from the 70 million devices that we'll be analyzing. We'll be able to store for much longer periods the device data, connectivity data, to be able to get more insights around device risk over time and to be able to do things like historical replay. And then specific to OT, iInspect next release will have a new has a new OT specific user interface. It will integrate directly with. Oh, sorry. That's telling me that my 30 minutes is up, so I have my 5 minutes left. It'll integrate directly with iSegment as well. And so we have direct integrations if we're doing, say, clinical with Medigate, or we're doing an integration with OT with iInspect. We'll be able to get the segmentation view through iSegment without having to have a deployment of iSight in conjunction with that. iSight will give us the IT part, iInspect will give us the OT part, Medigate will give us the clinical part. They can all feed into iSegment. And then the other thing is the use of compliance templates in order to be able to identify compliance to standards, like NERC SIP, for example, pre-canned NERC SIP validation templates, so we can evaluate the deployment of OT against the standards that we're being tested to. That's not yet applicable in APAC. It's really US-centric, but we do see utilities and the regulators heading down this path. So it may not be mandated, but it's something that that will be useful. Waiting for the next slide. And then one critical technology area for us and capability area is really around segmentation. And iSegment is getting a huge amount of traction outside of APAC. It is getting some good traction in pockets of APAC, but this for us is an untapped opportunity moving forward. This is core to the discussion around Zero Trust, and Zero Trust is top of mind as an approach to security across most enterprises that we talk to today. If you haven't looked at the product and you haven't had a demo, please go get a demo from ForeScout. We have stood up the capability for you to demonstrate this product yourself to clients as well once you understand it. So iSegment today lets us do that visualization of group-to-group traffic synthesized with real network, fused with real network flow, in order to identify what we have, understand how it's communicating, design, build, simulate segmentation policy, and then once that policy has been implemented, provide continuous assurance that the policy is still active. That is 5 out of the 5 steps to Zero Trust. And iSegment deals with 3 of those 5. Where we're going with iSegment is extending the capabilities of iSegment around risk. So given that we're introducing risk assessment into iSight X through the device cloud, that naturally flows through to being able to do, to expose risk as a parameter for making decisions around segmentation. And so instead of doing device A talking to device B or device type A talking to device group type B, I'm able to say, show me all of my clinical workstations that are currently high risk talking to patient databases. Once I've done that, I can then take action based on that. So I can have a set of action for high risk assets versus low risk assets of the same type, and have that implemented via iSegment triggering iControl, but based on device related risk, and exposed and analyzed as that through the iSegment console. And then finally, there's the innovations around enforcement. Now, for those of you that have worked with us for a long time, you know we support a wide variety of network infrastructures. It really is one of the core differentiators for ForeScout. But we don't support all of those network infrastructures to the same level. So we have a set of network switches, for example, that we can support access lists on, and then a large set that we don't, where we only do VLAN control or switch block. In an upcoming release of ForeScout, we are changing our ability to support more ACLs more readily on more infrastructure, because that is moving forward still going to be a very important control. We're also seeing that there are more types of networks that customers are deploying. We're seeing Juniper Mist, we're seeing Arista, formerly Mojo Wi-Fi, SD-WAN, Meraki. So we continue to develop capabilities to integrate with those and provide these closed loop controls. So there's some specific COA and radius innovations that are just being released to support things like Arista, where we can integrate very deeply with Arista. But that will also be true and useful for other network integrations. If you are a Dell shop, or you're integrating with Extreme, or you're integrating with next gen, with a next gen software defined network, a la NSX or ACI or SDA, Cisco SDA, great example. We continue to support that moving forward. And then finally, iExtend Connect, or iExtend Innovations. A couple of things around this. So currently we have 25 modules from ForeScout that are built and managed and maintained by ForeScout, often in conjunction with being a member of the partner vendors developer program. So we have a very close relationship with ServiceNow, for example, and we have a bidirectional development agreement with them. There are other modules where that integration is perhaps less bidirectional, but yet still we manage and maintain that. What we're seeing, and the challenge with that, is that our tier 1 modules we stay up to date with. We keep up to date with current releases. If there are defects, we can work with that partner organization to resolve them rapidly. Things like ServiceNow, Splunk, CrowdStrike. There are other integrations where we don't have so many customers using them, and there's a smaller amount, and we will only refresh them and update them every 12 months. And some of the antivirus examples are like that. We will be shifting those away to a different structure, which is iExtend Connect. iExtend Connect is essentially the app store of ForeScout integrations. It was launched back in February. It has 18 current integrations today, with a plan to get 40 done by the end of the year. You can see some of them up here. But there's integrations to things like, a customer needs to integrate with Ubiquity because they've moved down the Ubiquity path. That's all right. There's another customer that has a broad Ubiquity deployment, has written an app for that and has posted that to the community and is getting comments on that. So you can install that app onto iExtend Connect. It is an extension of what was the Open Integration Module, OIM, but with far more flexibility and far more development capability over time. We see less need for partner organizations or partner vendors to use our SDK to do integrations with us, because iExtend Connect is exposing that functionality to third-party developers. And a great example I saw just this morning, actually, was an integration with Ansible Tower. So how would, if you've already invested in a certain set of automation technology, and we want ForeScout to use that automation technology to orchestrate security response, iExtend Connect is the path to do that if we haven't written a module for the customer. And from a partner perspective, I think that is the way that you get to look at your current product portfolio and identify where the valuable integrations are that you can sell 1 + 1 is 3, where ForeScout is, a certain set of capabilities, and your, deception vendor or your endpoint security vendor has another set of capabilities. How do you tie those together? and my team is there to assist with understanding what the possibilities are. So I'm going to wrap up on the last slide around what else are we working on. And then I have what am I now? I'm 2 minutes over. So we continue to invest in cloud-related capabilities. We're going to continue to move components inside the ForeScout system that are currently on-prem into the cloud. With the next release, it is not a 100% cloud offering. It is not delivered from the cloud. It is not an MSSP play, but certainly that is where we are evolving to. You know, the policy engine should be able to run in the cloud, which should be cloud native with local sensors over time. The other thing with that is that that's how we will be able to address risk across new use cases. You know, rather than, you know, if we have the full view of every device in the enterprise, whether it's on-prem, off-prem, connected via VPN, or working from home, then if we need to augment our understanding of risk for all of those devices, rather than do that in 25 different networks across 25 different countries, I want to be able to do that for the entire ForeScout community by adding that data source to the device cloud. And then at that point, everybody is enriched with the information that we're exposing through that. It also gives us some unique areas to investigate related to ML and AI because we have that information at scale. We recognize that 5G is coming. We're actively working right now with some carriers in the US exploring what does 5G look like in the enterprise. If a customer is going for a network slice or a private APN, what does ForeScout provide both in the data center that we would do traditionally, in the cloud, or at carrier edge? So we're actively having those discussions now, but that's an area of research. What we're interested in hearing from you all is where are customers on that journey in your environments, because it varies by country. You know, in APAC and in emerging markets like Latin America, we see far more uptick of 5G for core network connectivity, and we saw the same for 4G and 3G before, than we did in the continental US. And so as we find pocket, and Asia is not the same, so different places in Asia go first with this. We want to know where that's happening because those are the carriers that we want to be talking to over time. And then finally, this has been the biggest shift for us. So we were known as an on-prem enterprise NAC solution, and we have had feedback from customers that have deployed us for that use case that my need for enterprise network access control has been reduced a lot because of COVID and the work from home. But the need to do device visibility, device risk assessment, device control hasn't gone away. But how can you help me with that, ForeScout? Now, if you're coming in over VPN, then a lot of the same rules still apply. You know, we get to, rather than network access control in the campus, we're able to do, you know, network visibility and segmentation using iSegment, for example, with the VPN connected users. But then we see a lot of customers that are not going even to VPN. They're using things like secure access, secure edge, SASE applications, Zscaler private access, you know, post-secure SDP. What would be interesting? So the question that I have for you. So number one, we recognize this is a gap in our solution, and we are racing to address this right now. For VPN connected use cases, I think we're okay. We just need to expand the number of VPN solutions that we support. But for the disconnected user, for the SaaS user that is primarily using SaaS applications through, you know, a CASB like Okta, for example, which is like ForeScout internal. What use cases are you hearing your customers ask for? Or what use cases could you envisage being valuable to your customers, knowing what ForeScout does and knowing what other solutions do in terms of connectivity? What would you be asking of ForeScout? We have some ideas, and we will share those with you as we flesh them out. But part of the challenge is identifying solid use cases. And so what I would love for you all in the next, you know, while we're on this call for the next 30 minutes, would be if you have specific use cases for the disconnected user in mind and you would love to talk about them in a little bit more detail, drop us a note in the chat and we will either, if you've got a great idea, put it down there, or just let us know that you've got something you want to talk about so we can reach out. We're actively doing R&D on this now, and it is not far future R&D. This is we have to address this need in the very short term. So we recognize the remote workforce and the software-defined perimeter has changed the game for a traditional NAC company. It's a good thing we're not a traditional NAC company and we're actually a device visibility and control pivoting or moving to the enterprise of things. We need to address those use cases for the enterprise of things that are disconnected. And so with that, I conclude the vision side. I think in the interest of time, I'll hold off on questions till the end, if that's okay, Vince. And I will look at.
That's correct. Well, we'll address the Q&A right at the end. So I think moving on very quickly, we'll move on to the OT, as a very good transition, continue with the products. So you have Dave Reeves and Hector Medrano. Dave has been, in the OT space for a very, very long time. I just can't remember how many years, but I know it's very, very long. And Hector, he's a real OT. He didn't come from IT side. He's a hardcore OT engineer working in the mining, and we were sincerely glad that he joined us to bring that side of OT, to bring and share his knowledge to the technical community on all the OT stuff that he faces in the field. So that's great stuff that we actually have here. So Dave, take it over.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you very much, Stephen. I had before. Good morning to everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. If we just go through to the next slide, please. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes talking about operational technology, where Hector and I fit in, and where we fit into the greater picture. So as a background, this slide hasn't been presented today. Silent Defence was started by Security Matters in around 2008, 2009, and it was acquired into ForeScout in October of 2018. Why 2008, 2009 is important is Silent Defence was the original anomaly detection tool for operational technology. So from a time in market, we've absolutely been the longest in the market, which means we have the most amount of use cases, the most amount of data, and support the most amount of protocols. What that means to you is it gives you its ease of use, the ability to deploy, and the ability to scale. Next slide, please, Vincent. So when we turn up at a client or when we get invited to talk to a client, and both Hector and I have come from client side as well as system integration sides. So typical client challenges is visibility is the #1 challenge of clients today in their OT networks. Without visibility, you cannot make any decisions. So we've seen, and Hector will talk through a scenario shortly on outages. So what we've seen a client in Australia have an outage over about 5 years. They had extended outages, and they'd invested about $7 million repairing those outages, but actually hadn't fixed the root cause. And Hector will talk you through that scenario soon. Visibility. So we always, for a security operations center, typically will have good visibility of the IT side of the network, but do they have visibility of the OT side of the network? And do they have the required amount of visibility to make informed decisions? We talk about connectivity. So we've probably been to one organization recently that only had no connectivity to IT and and no connectivity to the outside world. That's very unusual. Go back to Wahab's comment about risk. So how do you quantify without visibility risk for your OT networks? With visibility, you can make a risk-informed decision. The usual scenario from NIST, so we enable clients to be able to detect, respond, and recover to threats. Without visibility, without understanding what's in your network today, how do you achieve this? Also, from a cyber resilience point of view, visibility is huge, but I segment will be huge from an OT network point of view. That's the big unwash. So from a north-south point of view, inside a network, we typically have firewalls. From an east-west point of view, segmentation needs to be in place to improve the cyber resilience. Next slide, please. So these are some of the markets we work in today, and we'll talk you through some of those shortly. From an opportunity point of view, the greatest opportunity resides in regulated markets. So we'll talk, energy, we'll talk water and that sort of stuff. So everything the government maintain controls over. So Steve spoke about NERC-CIP earlier. In Australia, we have AEMO as a standard. In different parts of the world, you have different standards. In Singapore, the CSA, make sure you've got everything established as it should be. At the moment, we're doing a lot of work in energy. We're seeing a fair bit of uplift in maritime. Oil and gas, though oil's down at the moment due to COVID because no one's driving their cars. So there's opportunities across any of those fields today. Next slide, please, Vincent. Excellent. So we talk about framework. So in the IT space, you typically talk ITIL, COVID, NIST, PCI, parts of the world talk GDPR. With operational technology, though the standards are fairly similar, we talk more control frameworks such as your NIST CSFs, your NIST 853, your IEC 62443, etc., as well as regulatory and government mandates such as NERC, AMO, and the like. We're trying to catch up some time here, please, Vincent. So next slide, please. So from a trending point of view, Steve spoke about it. IT and OT are continuing to converge. It's a C-level issue, so they need visibility across it. And more we see the two parts of the organisations converging. We need to present it as a single report in a single dashboard. So how do you report a consolidated cyber risk posture if you only have visibility on the IT side of the network? IT is the first line of defense for OT networks. Early days in parts of the world, we're seeing the SOCs. So a SOC is an enterprise SOC. They've got visibility over IT and OT and accountability for OT as well, which is important to be able to see that extended enterprise in a single dashboard. OT cybersecurity purchases for discovery and classifying assets, as Steve spoke through, is not just for cyber events, but for operational. And again, Hector will talk to you through some of the operational learnings that we get. The next slide will be talking about the cyber attacks targeting OT networks. You will know some of these attacks and you've probably seen and lived through some of those attacks. They're far more sophisticated than they were 10 years ago. And again, the attack surface is expanding. Next slide, please. So the main thing you want to take away from this slide is the frequency of the attacks and the sophistication of the attacks. Most people would have heard of Stuxnet, as well as the Triconics attack. Singapore had a warship taken over about 2-3 years ago in Singapore Harbour. It was an American warship in Singapore Harbour that was taken over by a cyber attack. Plus WannaCry, NotPetya, and all that sort of stuff. Move forward to the next slide, please, Vincent. Hector.
Thank you, Dave, and everyone else. Very excited to have an opportunity to catch up with all the partners in region. We've been personally engaging all the partners, train them up, not only in silent defense, but also in what OT means. Most people that we talk about are actually just getting familiarized with OT and what cybersecurity means in there. And I hope this opportunity just opens that door for us to have a chat with you guys later on and go deeper into the subject. So this slide is basically summarizing the capabilities of silent defense without trying to go to or with any detail. As we always said in ForeScout, everything starts with visibility. Basically, we use two techniques to get a list of assets in the OT environment. The first one is a passive ingestion, usually from a span port in a network switch or several network switches. And from that traffic, we parse the different OT and IT protocols to identify every single asset in the network. But the second one, which is more recent, is an active selective scanning in using basically both IT and OT protocols as well. The reason why this is new is because the OT asset owners, they don't usually like active scanning. And it actually has bad reputation because in the past, IT professionals have been doing type of Nmap scanning, breaking the communications within the OT assets. But we've refined those techniques in these days, and it's actually that we commonly are using right now. Second of all, based on that database of assets that we've gained with silent defense, we can then match those assets with a very large vulnerability database that is embedded within silent defense and actually gets updated every month. We got more than 1,400 CVEs up to date, and that continued growing, and the software does that matching automatically. Something that is basically impossible in a large deployment to manually, both the asset inventory and the vulnerability matching. The third one is the network map. So for OT, we're able to recognize what device actually is talking to what kind of protocols, what kind of ports have been open and have been used, and how secure these protocols that are being used are implemented in the OT environment. That's basically coming from the passive monitoring capabilities of Silent Defense. Fourth one is the change monitoring, where again, passively able to identify if an asset in OT has been changed. Specifically target things like a firmware change or a configuration of the PLC or DCS server has been changed. That's actually quite important for the OT asset owners because these OT environments don't change very often. And if there's an unauthorized change, they want to know at first hand. We actually got a good use case that was implemented in one of the theme parks that are actually around the globe. The next one happened in Beijing. And they actually monitor very closely the signature of the PLC code that is running in the writes. And if they see any change, they let the operator of the write know, and he or she will straight away stop the write. That's as far we can take it. The next one is threat and anomaly detection. Again, basically based on passive scanning, we can identify by triggering an alert if there's any threat. For example, man-in-the-middle detection, spoofing, or insecure use of protocols, so on and so forth. And with all that information, we basically put into the dashboard contained within Silent Defense. But at the same time, we have the capabilities to put all that information for asset inventory and vulnerability management into the I side that most of the customers already have. So as a partner, we strongly engage you if you guys already have a customer with an IT deployment for ForeScout. Bring us to the picture. We can help you to talk to the customers. We can also help you talk about the value proposition for Silent Defense and have everything in only one big dashboard, for both IT and OT. Finally, integration and customizations. We can do direct integrations from Silent Defense, aka iInspect. Things like connecting directly to a SIEM or any asset management using REST API. But on top of that one, we can enhance those capabilities by connecting to iSide, and then from there using the complete set of tools that Steve was talking about before. Next one, Vincent, please. Very briefly, I won't spend too long on this one here, but when we're talking specific about threat detection, it's not only one technique that we use, but actually 7 of them. And that has been developed over the years. ForeScout acquired a company called Security Matters in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And you can tell how complex it gets to get all the information and threat hunting based on basically passive scanning, based on a span port, right? The right-hand side, vulnerability database, indicator of compromise, and communication baseline are capabilities that our competitors are getting at the moment. But on the left-hand side, the darker blue ones are capabilities that we've developed and we're very unique in the market. Things like the industrial threat library with more than 600 pre-cooked detection checks, the extensibility framework, basically what we call SDS scripts. We can tailor the software to whatever the customer needs. And finally, protocol compliance and anomaly detection, basically looking at the protocols and see any anomalies that don't comply to the specifications of the protocols. Next one, Vincent.
So I'll take over on this one. Thank you, Hector. Well done. Quickly, from a training point of view, there's lots of training enablement on MindTickle. We're also about to release FSDA training, which is the administrator training for silent defence, as a self-paced online course. And post that, there's an FSDE course. So if you've got any questions around training and enablement, please reach out to Vincent and team. So this was a recent global client evaluation and win. So it was a global distribution company headquartered out of Seattle. This was fairly unique in the OT space from a POV point of view, requirements point of view. So in essence, they ran silent defense side by side with 5 key vendors, and they looked at 5 similar vendors, and they looked across the 12 categories with around 200 requirements. So must-haves, nice-to-haves, etc. We won 9 out of the 12 categories, equal on 1 of the categories, and behind on 2. So we don't consider ourselves a log management and storage company. We keep all metadata on the devices. So this has been rolled out globally at the moment. It's a fantastic win for iInspect. It's a great reference site. So I think they're still the world's largest company at the moment. And again, key takeaways was the integration, the scalability with our 2 tiers of management, integration into the other parts of the ForeScout platform. So they continue to be a great reference site. Next slide, please. Vincent. Victor.
All right, good. Thank you, Dave. So we just want to share with the partners today a very specific example that we had during a proof of concept or proof of value with one of our mining customers here in Australia. So basically, silent defense is seen as a cybersecurity tool or software, but at the same time, as we're parsing the OT protocols, we actually can tell you how good the operations are actually going. And this case was very close to my heart because, as Vincent mentioned before, I came from mining industry. So when I was on site, even if the security guys brought us to the table or brought us to site, the guy said, look, for us, the most important thing is to keep the plant up and running, right? And we've had a case that we've been working for years, and we still haven't been able to figure out what is actually going on. They were using an IT tool that basically inspects the communications in the OT switches or network switches, see what is on and off, but they couldn't really get into the root cause of the issue. And that was happening for at least 4 years. So we started the proof of value. We implemented very quickly in a couple of days silent defense. We put a sensor and a command center, and basically we just left site and left it to monitoring. The week after, I was in another country actually, and I received a call because the guys had the operational trip happening again. This time, as we had eyes or visibility on the OT environment, we were able to investigate what was actually happening. The asset owner itself realized that one of the protocols was actually spiking up in traffic. And that's something new for them, because while before they could only tell if the communication was on and off, there is so much into it. We were able to see what kind of protocols they're actually using and how much bandwidth per protocol is being used. And in this specific one, Ethernet IP spiked up at the very same time where the trip happened. Then we connect regular modely to silent defense. We actually show a customer the explicit messages for this protocol that were happening around the time when the trip happened. And we were able to find out that a communication between 2 specific assets or PLCs was actually producing the spikes of the traffic at the very same time. And then we show the failed connections that those specific assets were happening in the past. And from there, they easily were able to identify a misconfiguration in the communication between those PLCs or those assets. Again, something impossible for them in the past. They tried very hard with the wrong tools to do it. but the amount of or the quality of information that was received from those tools weren't sufficient. Vincent, if you go please to the next slide. This is actually a snapshot on the upper side of the screen of Silent Defense. And you can tell in there the OT traffic is normally very stable. And by the way, very, very little. And Silent Defense is able to determine what protocol is being used and how much of that protocol. So around 3:42 in the morning, when no one is looking at it, but Silent Defense was recording all this information, you can clearly see a spike of the traffic in orange, which is the Ethernet IP protocol that we were mentioning before. And we get into that point in time because if you see in the bottom of the screen, we can tell the exact time when the alarm occurred and stop the conveyor that transports the ore on site. So from taking the customer to investigating this case for years without having a clue what was happening, we came and in a session that took us only half an hour, be able to identify the root cause. They fixed the issue and they've never had this issue happening again, saving millions of dollars for the company, literally, in production. Next one, please. I think that's it.
Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. Interesting stories, and this is real world problems. And you know, people say when we implement tools, what is the ROI? This is millions of dollars of ROI because they've actually basically prevented, you know, cost of the operations and these downtime. Right? So moving quickly because we are pressed for time. We wanted to move to Q&A because I do understand there's quite a lot of questions have been streaming in. So I'd like to take a look. Remember, if you want to actually ask a question live, please just click on the raise the hands one time and we'll unmute you and you can actually ask the question. Okay. Right, so what do we have? Mel, do we have any questions?
I know Steve's actually been answering them quite a bit as we've been going along. So I'm not sure if there's any points, Steve, you wanted to mention from any of the questions you got through that you were answering.
Just two key, sort of a constant theme. When it comes to cloud, different countries and different verticals have different kind of aversions to using cloud. So the question around, if I can't use cloud, what is the situation with iSight X? So two things. Over time, we will be having iSight X, just like iSegment, available natively in more of the various cloud regions with whichever cloud providers we provide. That's separate to the question about, well, I can't use cloud because I'm a government entity or I'm defense. So what capabilities do I get in core iSight if I don't have access to the cloud? The things that we showed you in the upcoming vision and for ForeScout X absolutely do require cloud connectivity to be able to do the augmented classification and risk assessment. How much of that will filter back down to a 100% on-prem deployment with no cloud connectivity is yet TBD. There no doubt will be some enhancements around device classification, but a lot of what we're doing relies on being able to do it at scale in real time. That will require cloud connectivity. As I've mentioned to a couple of the respondees, my team is currently going through by region, by country, by vertical, try to discover what, where can we, where can't we, so we can feed it back to the BU. So kind of watch this space, but it's a very salient question. We're very aware of it. We are not 100% cloud dependent at all. It's an augmentation of the on-prem deployment, at least at launch. Cool, thanks. Yep, I'm seeing thumbs up. The other questions have been answered in the chat or in the Q&A panel. So.
Okay. So any more questions out of that? Because I think the questions on the chat was available and is visible to everyone. And so you could see the answers, Steve was actually answering them. But there's one in the Q&A one from Ritesh. As our government and PSU, this would be are not allowed to push data outside of the India cloud. What was ForeScout's plan to have cloud in India for iSegment and iSight X?
Yep, so similar to the first piece, plan TBD. We're starting with North America, moving it out from there. If cloud is okay, but it just has to be this in-country cloud, that is not a bad situation to be in, because then it just comes down to opportunity size or market size to decide when we get there. The challenge is more around, I can't do cloud at all. How are we going to support these advanced functions? Different problem.
Okay, great.
And Ritesh has my email if he wants to ping me directly.
Yeah, great.
Add to that, I think what will be useful exercise is for Vince and the camp team, Surojit in India or any country, give us a sense of what the opportunity you think will be, right? Then we'll take it from there to see, we'll prioritize it. What I can do is I can go back to corporate and say, hey, look, this is the projected demand, right? And then we'll take it from there.
Yep.
There's a couple of questions there from Dennis as well in the Q&A, Steve and Vincent.
I'm asking, so we'll move on. I'm typing as we speak.
And maybe you can just read it out as you. Yep, sorry.
Sorry, if I answer in the Q&A, does everybody see it? Because if not, I'll just post it to the everyone.
Yeah, no, actually, this is.
That's fine. I'll put it in a group chat.
Yeah, put it in a group chat. Okay. Any other questions out there?